Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. Today we're going to be talking about seller productivity. It's one of my favorite topics, so I'm been looking very much forward to today. My name is Oliver. I'm a partner here at the Quadrant Consulting, and my professional passion is making commercial engines run on data instead of gut feeling. So today is right down my alley. I hope you are ready for about 40-45 minutes of some slides, and there's going to be a Q&A in the end. So feel free to drop questions in the chat, and I'll answer them when we get there. Good. For those of you who don't know about Quadrant, then very briefly, we are a small, very focused management consultancy in Copenhagen. We are about 35 people now, and we love to write books on everything related to growth. So that's what we do, commercial topics, both sales and marketing related in companies with complex sales processes or go-to-market setups. So that's kind of the only thing we do, and that's why we love to get super nerdy about these topics. Today, we're going to start talking a little bit about the seller productivity crisis. Then we are going to open up some of the concepts that are the cure to the seller productivity crisis. What can you actually do about it? And I think in general, in the whole data AI sphere, there's a lot of fluff and concepts and buzzwords. So we're going to try to make it super concrete with a case where you can see how one company used AI and sort of data-driven prospecting to open a brand new segment where they had virtually no foothold. So we're going to make it super practical. And then at the end, we have the Q&A session. So once again, if any questions come up during the webinar, feel free to post them in the chat, and then I'll answer them later. All right, let's open up. So I think the first thing I want to touch upon is, why is it even important to look at seller productivity? Is it really sort of an executive level topic? But I definitely argue that it is, because of all the sales and marketing costs you have, sales is typically 65 to 90%. I've even seen 95% in one company. And of that share of the sales cost, labor is 60 to 80% of the total cost. So quick math, it's between 39 and 72% of all your, say, commercial costs is labor. Sales labor. So in essence, it is a leadership imperative to care about how your sales force use their time and if they get enough value out of it. Now, with that premise as a starting point, this slide might upset you a little bit because what we're looking at is a pretty drastic development in how much time B2B sales reps spend in front of customers. So this is enterprise sales reps, and it's direct selling activities, which means face-to-face meetings, virtual meetings, and prospecting. And what we're seeing here is that over the last 15 years, which is not all that much, we see a drop from around 50% down to 29% this year. And these numbers are from Salesforce. So if anybody should know, they would be a good a good guess for who'd kind of know. So the question is, why is this happening? What's actually going on out in the market? And I think there are two main drivers. One is that selling is getting more complex. So buyers are getting more educated. They do more research. There are more people, more like bigger buying committees, and they enter the sales process later. So they wait until they contact a salesperson, until they want to get in touch with someone before they have done all their own due diligence or their own research. This means that if you're a salesperson, you need to be way better educated. You need to bring more value to the table. You need to be more relevant. There's a higher expectation that you actually understand the customer where they are. So you need to do more research. And in order to do that, you need to access more data. You need to use more tools. We talk about the tool tyranny in B2B sales, and you need to register all of it in CRM. So what it means is that salespeople now need to master more and more disciplines to actually sell effectively. The only problem is that having salespeople do everything, including all the research, is pretty ineffective. So salespeople aren't necessarily good at or motivated by using tech and crunching data, analyzing annual reports, and then talking to customers. Some are not. And I think that's a pretty important distinction here. But the essence is that highly paid sellers and B2B reps are often pretty expensive, should spend their time where it adds most value, with buyers. That's kind of the premise. So if that's our mission, then we need to open up and understand a little bit, well, where do they spend their time today? And is there any place where we can take some of the tasks they are doing and give them to somebody else? Either somebody else with a low salary, or even better, an automated setup where we can run some of these tasks in an instant and just provide them with the outcome. So again, they can spend more time where they add value. So to get that picture, let's open up a little bit what they actually spend their time on. And as we saw before, they spend 29% of their time on selling, direct selling, in-person meetings, virtual meetings, and prospecting. Then, in addition to that, they spend 9% of their time researching prospects. They spend 10% generating quotes or proposals. They spend 9% on internal meetings and trainings, 9% on preparation and planning, 9% on manually entering customer and sales info, 9% on admin, 8% on prioritizing leads and opportunities, and then 8% downtime. So where's the potential in this? Well, it's actually on most of these. Of course, in downtime and internal meetings and trainings, we can't really do much about that. But especially in researching, prioritizing accounts, I have a big portfolio. Who do I talk to? What do I talk to them about? That's where we can really make a very big difference with tech and data and AI. Okay, so let's say now you have an intention, you want to do something with data and AI. But then you also recognize that there's a pretty long way from intention to the implemented solution. Because what you're looking at is an AI landscape that changes every 3 months. Maybe the data you have in your organization isn't exactly top quality. And maybe you want a solution that's not compliant with corporate IT, say no. Maybe you get it approved and you end up in the proof of concept theater with endless pilots that never really materialize. Maybe you do actually get to production and then IT says, okay, great, here's a ticket, we'll look at it in 2 years. Maybe it actually gets to work, but then you see that the impact was pretty overhyped. It's not a 30% increase, but it's a 3% increase. And those are kind of the pitfalls you're facing on the road to actually getting some value creating solutions out of data and AI. So what do you then do if you're facing this? How do you maneuver this space so that you get to the valuable part on the promised land on the other side? Well, it's actually quite simple. First, you map all your processes, then you calculate effort and impact for all of them, and you make a beautiful 3-year roadmap. No. Wait. That's actually not what you want to do. This is the old world approach, and it's correct for a lot of things, but not for AI. And because what happens is that, again, if you have your intention, you map everything out, you calculate the effort, you're really thorough, and you make the beautiful roadmap, and then bam, it's outdated. Right? The landscape is moving so fast that the traditional waterfall approach is just broken when applied to this area. So it simply doesn't work. And what's a little bit tricky here is that it's actually theoretically correct, the good old map and figure out. It's a really solid process from a methodological standpoint, but it's just practically wrong in this application. Right? So making a roadmap, it should take 2 weeks, not 6 months. And if you want to do that, you have to accept a big portion of uncertainty, right? Certainty and accuracy are illusions. You can never obtain it, again, because it's moving relatively fast. Instead, you need more of an experimentation mindset where you try something out and then you promote what works and kills what doesn't. So we need to try, we need to get feedback from both the market and also what sticks internally and what doesn't, and then we use that. The good news is that making this roadmap it's actually a smaller set of possible outcomes than you might imagine. So I'm going to make a bold claim and say that for 80% of the people watching this webinar, the most impactful initiative they can do is on this slide. And what we have here is within the marketing domain, we have content and messaging creation, a big opportunity for AI and data-driven tools. We have inbound request handling, data-driven account segmentation, industry or customer-specific value propositions, which is another pet peeve of mine, that value propositions really need to be tailored to who's receiving them. But that's another webinar. Then in the sales side, we have prospect identification and prioritization, meeting prep, follow-up emails, auto CRM capture, quote generation, ROI or TCO calculators, RFP responses, proposal or statement of work generation. And then once buyers have become accounts, you have something around visit and topic allocation. Who do I visit? What do I talk to them about? White space analysis, upsell, cross-sell roadmaps, churn prediction. And then across the commercial disciplines, you have data analysis, reporting, and impact tracking as sort of a layer on top. Of course, it depends on your context and exactly what's most relevant for you. Also depends on the market you're in, what kind of data you have, the maturity of your sales and marketing organization, and so on. But again, 80% of the viewers in this webinar, this will be one of their most impactful cases. Okay, so now we've gone through a bit of problematization, a bit of theory, a bold claim. So let's have a look at what it actually looks like under the hood if we want to make one of these things come to life. So the case, as mentioned, is about a company that manufactures sanitary technology and wants to get into a new segment through AI-driven prospecting. So right now they're an established player in ceramics and behind-the-wall sanitary technologies, so systems and piping, and they want to move into industrial piping. So many of the pipes they have behind the wall is sort of the same. They do have the product portfolio, and in neighboring markets they have success in applying and selling that product portfolio to industrial projects. So there is a real, pretty solid hypothesis that we can make this work. The only issue is that they only have 6 contacts within the segment in the CRM system, so they have virtually no presence at all. The question is then, where do you start? And for this specific company, they had 1 sales rep, and they had a total potential market of 580,000 potential prospects. And that means that to just start calling is probably a pretty bad idea, right? If you have 50, you could go and talk to all of them, but if you have 500,000, it's probably not a good strategy. So what do you then do? You probably need, again, some help in understanding that data landscape and getting to some pretty specific recommendations for which of these prospects should you start talking to, and what should you talk to them about. So again, where do you start? Now it's very tempting to jump right to developing a cool solution, right? We want the bells and whistles, and we need some AI, and it has to be shiny, and we have to show it to our friends and all this stuff. So this is the typical focus of where you want to start, and I think in most of the use cases you see, it's probably only on the solution itself. But what I think you have to realize is that it's not just about developing a solution, it's about building prospecting capabilities in the organization. And that requires a bit more. And I think this kind of holistic view, not having it is one of the main reasons why initiatives like these fail. Because where you want to start is you want to make sure you have a where-to-play audience strategy in place. You want to make sure that the segment you're looking at actually holds some potential. This is typically in place, just like it is here. We see success in neighboring markets. They have the same dynamics. It's probably directionally correct to go into this segment. But then I think the most tricky part, which is often overlooked, is you want to understand who is the ideal customer profile. What are they looking like? Where are they in the buying process? Of course, the main characteristics, like how much buying power do they have? What are their needs, their pains, and so on. But then that's coupled with the ideal value proposition and sales play. So here you have the ideal customer, but what do you then say to them? So it's in that interaction, the ideal interaction between the ideal customer and the right sales play, that's where the magic happens. And that's what we need to understand in order to build a good model. Right? So you probably can't just knock on the door and ask someone if they want to see your industrial pipes. It's probably not going to work. So what is it that will bring value to the ideal customer, and what that will make them award you some time to show what you're offering and how you might be able to help them out. So once that's in place, then you can go to the data gathering. So what kind of data do we have internally and externally? For prospecting like this, with almost zero presence in the CRM system, it's all external data. And then you develop the solution. And then afterwards, you also make sure that you double down on onboarding and operating model. Right? So we need to make sure we answer all the questions around how does it actually get used, who owns what, who updates it, what's the responsibilities of the sales rep, the sales manager, sales leadership in the market, and how do we track and measure? Because in the end, the only way that these models, AI and data, add value is that in the interaction with the buyers we have. So if the front line in this case doesn't change behavior, nothing happens. Even though we have the most beautiful model, if frontline doesn't do something different, right, of course also includes marketing touch points, so it's not a part of this case, then we get nothing, right? So it has to keep the frontline behavior in front and center. Let's open up a few of these just to give some illustrations of the work we did. So the first part is around the ideal customer profile. And what we started doing is mapping out what does this market look like when an industrial project is done. What happens? And the first thing we did was look at the split between new projects and maintenance and refurbishment. And here around 2/3 was in new projects and around 1/3 in maintenance and refurbishment. They have very different buying dynamics. So for the purpose of this, we said, okay, we focus on new projects. We make some choices. And the way it typically works is if you're building a new factory, for example, there's an investor or a developer that starts the project. Sometimes they hire an architect, and sometimes they go straight to the industrial planner. An industrial planner is that takes, say, the concept and then makes the actual blueprint with the millimeters and which pipes and products go where. So those are actually the main decision maker in this case. Then there's a general contractor who, say, owns the execution, and typically the general contractor gets some subcontractors or some installers, and they also have a bit of decision-making power, but maybe 20% for the installers and 80% for the industrial planners. After that, the installers, they buy their building materials in a wholesaler or distributor, and then once the project is handed over, it gets handed over to the technical or the maintenance teams, who then own the refurbishment. But again, it's very different people that you would have to build relationships with. So what we said, we took a decision and say, okay, it's the industrial planners that have 80% of the decision-making power for new projects. So those are the ones we focus on. We have a way of connecting with them, and we believe we can influence them. So those are the ones that we will target with this model. Next thing is then saying, okay, so now we have these. How do we figure out who they are? And the way we proceeded was to say, okay, we actually look at the industry codes. Now, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with industry codes. They're both really good when you have nothing, but they're also really bad. Like companies do them once they start, and if they pivot direction, they don't update them, and you always have a lot of false positives and negatives. But again, it's better than nothing. And when you work with a data set this big and put additional enrichment on top, you can filter out the ones you don't need. So here we went for a pretty broad inclusion of industry codes. So looked at some accounts from the ones we had in CRM and the ones they had in neighboring markets. The good accounts there, which industry codes are they? What do they represent? What do they look like? Then we went to different local associations, industry associations, and saw, okay, so the people there and their companies, which kind of industry codes are they? So we found some relevant ones. And then we found, we took all of that and extracted it from Orbis. Orbis is a database. It could also be done in Bradstreet, could be many other databases, but that's the idea. The ones we're looking for are typically bigger, so we set a lower cap on how many employees they needed to have just to sort out a little bit. Next part was then enriching the data. So from Orbis, we had the financials, which is a good start, but of course it doesn't tell us much about the industrial planners. So what we did some web scraping and some AI enrichment. And I think this is one of the really cool applications of AI at scale, where a few years back you would do web scraping and you would have to define all the keywords, maybe a few hundred, translate them 1, 2, 3 different versions, and then you would scrape for them. And once you scraped, that was kind of it. But now we can take the entire website and summarize it, and then use one of, say, OpenAI's models. You could also use other LLMs to understand the entire website and the context in it, right? So it's good at understanding synonyms, it's good at understanding the context, and can use that to say, okay, is this a relevant account for us? The cool thing is that you can both see, okay, is it actually an industrial planner? Because these industry codes are wide. They also have a lot of non-industrial planners in them. But then secondly, you can also see which kind of plants or factories do they actually talk about. Because for this particular company is somewhere more important than others. So you can also make, additionally, you can make in principle as many variables as you want to help guide you. So this was a big unlock for this model, to have this kind of intelligence applied to the website. The problem with website data is, of course, it's just stuff they write about themselves, right? Usually, they have projects listed that are real, but again, it's what they say about themselves. So what we'd also like is to have some concrete data of what they actually do. And here, I think there's a building project database we use that again was a relatively big lever in making this model having it generate a good output. So this is a project database called Compass. You have different ones in different countries. In UK, it's Glenigan. In Germany, it's eBau. In Denmark, it's called Byggefakta. But different companies that register building projects that are ongoing. So here we had data back to 2008, and we could use that for two things. We could say, okay, the industrial planners we have found, have they been in any relevant projects in relevant industries in the right role since 2008? That's an indicator of what they actually do. And then we could also see, do they have any of the same projects that are in the early stage and are active right now, where we might be able to influence the choice of industrial pipes they use. So this is actually kind of an opportunity that, or a lead that we got out of using this data as well. All right. Then we get to the actual scoring, where we say, okay, what's most important? And we have the financials, the web scraping stuff, we have the project database, and we make a first version of the scoring logic. Then we deep dive all the way down to 20 very specific projects that we go through with the key account manager. And then we take the learnings and update the scoring logic. And then after that, we pilot again for a slightly longer time to gather more learnings, and then we value and reiterate. So making these models is, of course, requires that you have a understanding of the big picture, but you have to get down to the specific line-by-line view of the accounts to make it really add value. So it's a bit of a game of looking for errors in the model, which kind of these suggestions don't make sense, and spot patterns, and then correct as you go. All right, but as mentioned, we're not finished yet, right? We have a cool tool, it can predict some stuff, but if it's not embedded in an organization, if it's not anchored, if it's not changing a workflow, a new way of working, it's just a shiny gadget, right? We need to change frontline behavior before something actually happens. And so for this pilot, we made a very simple operating model where the project team was responsible for updating the model with new Compass data, and then the core operations, the sales team, was responsible for identifying the right prospects, just using the Excel list, confirming, going to the website, finding the right people, and then running the sales play, either go out and build a relationship, or if they have an active tender, then of course discuss that. Then there's an evaluation that feeds back to the data model. And this is super low tech, and that's actually on purpose. So again, we're starting, now it's one person, so then it's actually feasible to do in Excel. And we're starting out here and we'll look at the results. And if it's good results, then we automate slightly more, either that we make the data more available, for example, as visits or tasks in the CRM system, or that we automate finding the right people. But then it's you start out and you can build on top and make it more sophisticated as you see that it actually works. So again, it's a bit of this like promote what works and kills what doesn't, so that you manage the investments you have with the results you're getting. Right. So what's the key takeaways here? For me is that I think the first one, you can't separate tech and subject matter expertise. Right? It simply doesn't work. To make a good AI prospecting model, you have to know prospecting and you have to know AI. Right? At least for these prototypes, you cannot separate subject matter expertise from the technology itself. Second things, you really want to build capabilities. If you have some cool tools sitting on a shelf and they don't get used, again, they don't actually move the needle. In the same vein here, you want to integrate it into the operating rhythm to get some impact. And then finally, I think here automation can make processes more efficient, but can also unlock entirely new processes. So I think this is a bit of the case here, where prospecting just really wasn't done, but now we do it, and relatively efficiently to begin with. So all in all, there's so much potential in data-driven sales and AI, but there are no magic bullets. Right? There are no quick fixes. You can build some really cool tools, better tools than you could before, but you still need to have all the change work. You still need to get it embedded, and you still have a limit of how many you can introduce at one time into an organization. So no magic bullets. The question I want to leave you with as a take-home for your leadership team is, when you look at this picture here, which area holds the biggest potential for you to increase sales efficiency in your commercial organization, and which capabilities would you need to get in place to actually make it a part of the ways of working to create a lasting impact. All right, well then, thank you very much. If you have other questions, you're welcome to drop me an email or write me on LinkedIn. My name is Lund Storgaard, and I'll send out a follow-up email after this webinar where you can also see my email. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and otherwise have a beautiful day. Thank you.